We welcome you into another episode of Scrushy on Business. My name is Dave Green, joined by Richard Scrushy. And Richard, hope you're doing well this week. We're going to have another fun show for folks.
I tell you, Dave, I'm doing well. I'm excited about today's show. Some of the things that we've been talking about are so important. I've had a lot of feedback from a lot of people that tell me that are making very positive comments. I had one comment from an individual, is a lady who drives a long way to work. She listens to our show every week, and she said that she really likes the momentum, the way that you and we don't drag it out. We talk, we go back and forth, we discuss things, and she said she really likes that, and it's interesting to her, all the different things we talk about. So we got a lot to go over today. I know we have a backlog of questions that have come in on our info at scrushyonbusiness.com, and there are a lot of folks that we just haven't had time to get to. So we're going to try and get to as many of those as we can today. Is that right? Is that the plan?
That is the plan for today. And I wanted to start with something a gentleman named Craig from Miami, Florida wrote in, and he asked a question about generational planning. We've talked about that a couple of times here on Scrushy on Business. And it's something I mentioned to you. You're going to have this, in a whole generation of people who have built up businesses, who have been around for 20, 30, 40 or more years. Some people, Richard, who got a business from their relative, their father, their grandfather, or whomever it might have been in their family. And now we're going to have the baby boomers selling businesses or handing them down to the next generation. And the people that I've talked to that are in that world of succession planning have said more and more they are finding the next generation would rather have the money on a sale than continue the business. So there's so much in play with that. And before I get to Craig's question, what are your thoughts? Because to me, it seems like the next decade is just going to be a tremendous opportunity to go out and acquire businesses that have done an amazing job.
You bring that up, and I happen to have an acquaintance who is exactly in that position right now. A gentleman has built a very successful business, and he's in his mid 80s, and he's looking to, kick back and not have to carry such a heavy load every day. And he's getting tired. He doesn't have the energy that he used to have. But the gap between him and the ones that would take over in his family is so big. It's like 50 years. I mean, and difference in age. And he told me, I was with him not long ago on a Sunday afternoon. I was sitting talking to him, and he said, Richard, I don't think they're ready. I can't, I mean, I don't, I, they don't have the experience. And, they spent a great deal of time going to college, and most of them have master's degrees, and they're in their mid 20s, and now they're in their mid late 20s, and and they're not quite ready to take over a large corporation, and so there's a gap, and that's a problem. So he's should I sell my company? Should I hire somebody to come in and run it until they're old enough and experienced enough to be able to take it over? This is a real problem, and I think this is what you're talking about. There's a gap there of talent. Unfortunately, you and I and so many people who are older, we went to work at young ages, and we came out of school working. We worked while we were in school. We were, we prepared ourselves, and then and so I think what we're seeing now is that it is a problem. It really is. And, I hate to say it, but maybe we spoiled a lot of the kids. Were spoiled. I mean, they didn't have to work while they were going to college. They didn't have to have a part-time job. They were driving a nice car. They were going to college. They went to all the parties. They did all the fun things, and they're just not ready to take over a large, company, $100 million a year business, and they're 27, 28 years old. And I think about myself. I was running $100 million company when I was 30 years old, and I was all over it because I had spent the time working and training under other people. So I was ready to do it. But it's a good question. How do you fill the gap? Do you bring somebody else in with experience? Do you sell the business? And of course, the youngsters, like you said, many of them was just give me the money. Just give me the money and go and I'll figure it out from there. Is that what you're hearing?
Now, that's a lot of what I'm hearing. And Craig's question specifically was, when you're passing down a business, how do you decide when it's time to start that process? And what's the first conversation to have? And my answer would simply be as early as possible as
Yeah.
you can get
Oh, really?
someone in learning from you, because you have to know that that person is willing to put in the same blood, sweat, and tears you've put in.
You know, and you don't have to be, it doesn't I mean, if your siblings and this, if you don't have the children at the age, or you don't have the children that are interested in running a business, you need to be bringing other people up that that you can bring in that really become part of your family, young people that you start training them early. You don't wait till you're 85 years old and then say, hey, I need to do something. Probably this gentleman, probably 10 years ago, should have had some people in training under him, learning the business, that were dedicated to him, that were loyal. And that is a difficult thing. I had a CEO of a company one time. Matter of fact, I tell you, it was Bill Mackey. He was CEO of Lifemark Corporation. He was chairman, and he told me, he said, "There's no such thing as loyalty in business." He said, "You need to understand that, Richard." He told me that I was a young guy in my late 20s, and he said, "There's no such thing as loyalty." And I was like, "What do you mean?" He said, "You can't trust anybody." And in business, he said, "You think they're loyal to you." Well, I learned in my life, in my business experience, that there were people that I thought were loyal because I had done so much for them and promoted them up and worked with them and trained them. And then at the end of the day, it was really all about them, and they didn't care anything about what you had done for them. But I don't buy into that 100%. I think that there are good people in this world, good Christian men and women that will earn their place and that will do the right things, and that if you treat them right and you work with them, that you'll find that they will be able to carry the business forward. And if you do have, you know, younger family members that are, between in that, between this, here's a guy 85. If he had some people that were working with him that was somewhere maybe in their 40s or late 30s that could have been trained, that understood that his family members were going to one day take over the business, but they would work with him. I mean, you can do that, but
Sure.
like you said, start immediately. As soon as you have a viable business that's sizable, you need to be training some people to run it, because you never know when you might not be able, things might happen in your life that, and you're not able to work 40 hours or 50 hours or 60 hours a week. You're going to need some help. But I agree with you. I think that you need to be thinking about that as soon as you have a viable business, as soon as your business is beginning to grow and emerge as a successful company, you need to be putting people in place that can work and carry on in case something happens to you. Now, if you're going to run a public company, forget the family thing. I mean, it just doesn't work that way. I'm telling you, you get highly criticized on Wall Street when you start promoting up family members. They hate it when you put them on the board. They hate it when they're in senior leadership positions. They question you about it. I remember going to Wall Street, and my brother worked in our company, and he was in the construction side of our business, building our hospitals, and I got questions all the time. Why'd you hire your brother? But Jerry was not on the board, and he didn't report to me. So those things gave us some protection, but let me tell you, they don't like that. So of course, you take an example like Walmart, the Waltons. Of course, a lot of family members in the business there, but that's a different story, right? Sam Walton started with nothing, and he built an incredible organization. What a story, huh? What an entrepreneur he
Mm.
was.
Made a lot of people very, very wealthy, and continues to.
Yes.
Jennifer in Charlotte, North Carolina wrote in, Richard, and this kind of ties in. She says, a lot of people are good at building, but not at handing things off. What helped you learn to delegate without losing control? And I will openly admit, this is something I struggle with every day. I try and have a hand in every single thing that we do. And Richard, I will tell you that I have a difficult time envisioning a world where I don't have all of that control. So it has been very, very difficult for me. And again, when you put family in the mix, I can only imagine, what that puts into it. But Jennifer's question, how do you learn to delegate?
Well, you can't unless you have systems in place that would reporting systems, processes where you can look at things and see how things are going. I was criticized at one point, which was ridiculous. I had meetings every week with all of my officers, and I had at one time 120, I think, officers in our company. We have 50 something thousand employees. We had over 2,000 locations all over the world, and so we had a large number of vice presidents, senior VPs, group VPs, assistant VPs, and every week I had a meeting. And that meeting would last about an hour, no longer than 2 hours. And we'd start around 7 or 8 o'clock every Monday morning. And and we gave everybody just a minute or so just to kind of give an update on what they are doing in their area. They would submit a report every week. Here's the things I'm working on this week. Here's what I did last week. And so we would register, what they were doing. And so there it was there. And so they had to report. So they were responsible and they were accountable for being able to achieve the things that they reported on. And if they didn't report on anything, they obviously were not needed. I mean, if you find that they're not doing anything, and then of course the next week when they came in, they were had to respond to, this is what I said I was going to work on last week, and this is what I did. So if you were working on doing a new surgery center, and you came in, you said I got it completed, and okay, great. If it never happened, then you're sitting there, you're saying, well, wait a minute, you said you were doing this, and or you're not doing it. So, but I didn't. I turned that over to them. I gave them the responsibility to go make it happen. All I wanted them to do is tell me whether or not they did it.
Right.
And so there's systems that you can put in place where you let your people go out and do what they're skilled and trained to do, but you make them report. And reporting takes a minute. I went out and I did all this. I went to California. I worked on this project out there. We're building that hospital. I've got everything up to speed. It's on target. We're going to finish it in the next 3 months. They report. They tell you what they did, and And so they're accountable for those things. But how long did it take? It took 30 seconds for them to report. So if you don't and really it gets back to communication. If you don't communicate with the people that work for you, and it's really kind of a neat thing when you think about it. And a lot of people that are not managers are not really skilled in the area of that, or don't want to ask. And I'll tell you, it's a lazy thing for a manager not to ask the people working for him, "What did you do? Did you work? What did you do last week? What are you doing for us? What is your plan this week?" And I always hated the guy that came and said, "Hey, boss, what do you want me to do this week?" Or what do
Right.
you do? I didn't want that guy working for me because if he didn't know what his job was, I mean, come
Yeah.
on.
Yeah. At
You,
least have an idea.
yeah, because I turned it over to them. And if everybody in a company with 50,000 people had to come ask me what to do today, how are you going to run that business? You
Never
can't.
going to get anything done.
Well, how do you do it if you have 10 employees and they're all having to ask you, what do you want me to do? No, okay, here's your job. Here's your standards, here's your procedures, here's everything that I expect you to do. And you set that up, for every job position. And people then know, and you make them sign it, and you say, okay, this is your job. These are the things you're supposed to do. Now go make it happen. And all I'm going to ask you when I see you is, did you do it? And that's it. Took just that quick. Did you do what you said you were supposed to do? What you said, your job is, and that's it. And if they said they didn't, you ask them why, and you try to understand it, right? And you put a plan together to make it happen. So really, getting back to her question, you put your business together properly where you communicate with your people and you have reporting and you can look at those reports. And a lot of times if I was traveling, I would get those reports sent to me prior to computers. They were sending it to me in a written format. And then once we got the computers, I got all of those reports. I could travel, look at my computer and see where everybody was doing. And it would take me less than an hour to see what 120 people were doing that week. Now, you tell me that's not a good system. And, and people, Some people hated it. I called them Monday morning meetings. They called them Monday morning beatings. You know why? Those are the people that didn't want to report,
Right.
that didn't want to do what they were hired to do, wanted to complain, didn't want to do the job that you want. I mean, I'm telling you, you got
Yeah.
people like that. Now, those are the ones that get you in trouble. And if you got more of them than you got of the ones that just work and do it, then you're in trouble. So if you're running a company and let's say you have 10 key people and seven of them are complaining because you're asking them what they're doing, they don't like to be questioned. You've made some bad hires. You got to get people in there that say, "Here's what I did this week. Here's what I'm going to do next week. Here's what I did last week. I did exactly what I was supposed to do. But not only did I do all of that, I did this over here too."
Hmm.
And then you see, oh my gosh, that's the person that's going to get promoted. That's the person that's going to help you build that company. That's
Yeah.
the person you can lean on. And I'm going to go back to something real quick. I don't want to beat this to death, but back when I was a young guy and I was working at LifeMark Corporation and I got promoted every year, promoted, promoted, and promoted. One of the reasons I got promoted is because when I sat in meetings and the CEO of the company or the president of the division or whoever I was reporting up to came in and said, "We got to make this happen and this happen and this happen." You guess what? I went out and made those things happen. So if he ever said, "I need somebody to go to Arkansas, I got an account up there that went sour and we need to get straightened out. Is there somebody that would do it?" I'd say, "I got it. Let me go." And people hated me for that. Can you believe that?
Sure. No, I
I
get
had
it
people
though.
said to me, "Why do you always volunteer for stuff?" And I said, "Because I know I can go make it happen.
Right.
And I'm excited about the opportunity to work in this company." And of course, I got the raises, I got the bonuses, I got the stock options, and I got the promotions. And because I was willing to do the extra work. So, and then I ended up running a multi-billion dollar company that was, that I had founded. So, or several of them. So, anyways, I don't want to beat that to death, but the bottom line is you can achieve whatever you want to achieve, but you've got to be willing to do the work. You got to be willing to get out there and make it happen. So, trying to find people like that, they're hard to find. But if you find them, let them loose, let them go, let them report to you. You don't need to look at everything over their shoulder, everything they're doing, as long as they're accomplishing the things that they're set out, that you want them to do.
Yeah, and it goes back to good people, as you said. If you have the people that you can trust, that will work. You talked about, when people would come to you. One of my biggest pet peeves in being a manager is when somebody comes to you, whether it's with part of an idea or if it's a problem, and they don't offer anything. They just come to you and tell you, "Hey, I have this problem," or "I have this idea, but I haven't, thought it through." Especially with the problems. I want to come in and complain about something. Now, I have no suggestion as to how to fix it. You're the manager, you're the boss. I want you to fix this. And
No
those were
solution.
the people I would certainly help fix the problem, but that wasn't somebody I was willing to push up in my organization. The people who would come in and say, "Here's a problem I'm having. This is what I think a solution should be. What do you think?"
Oh no, man, you are right on, Dave. I mean, that is it. You want look, the people that are going to really help you are the ones that identify the problem, but they bring the solution. They look around, they know how to fix things. They understand. I mean, if you have somebody that's constantly presenting problems to you, you got to think, now why is that? Are they doing it for attention? Are they really not smart enough to figure out how to solve that? Because if I've got to sit here all day long and solve all of these people's problems, we're not going to be able to move this company forward. You want people that can identify the issues and fix them. But let me tell you what you really want. They identify it and fix it, and you don't even get involved in it. And you find out about it afterwards. This happened and they did this. And, but,
Best
one of
feeling
the
in the world.
yeah, one of the things on a personnel evaluation form sometimes is judgment. It'll say, ask about the
Right.
person's judgment. Well, your judgment is critical. If you don't have proper judgment, you can do some really dumb things in a company. And so judgment is really important when they find a problem and they fix it. Having the ability to know what the available fixes are and what is acceptable within the company and within their policies and procedures and what the goals are of the company, that's important. Now that takes somebody that's paying attention, looks around and says, "Okay, I see we got this problem over here. and I know I got these things over here and opportunities to fix it. So, excuse me, you got to have people that are smart enough to be able to understand the environment in which they're working in and to be able to see what the opportunities are, not only to fix things, but also opportunities to actually move and not only take a problem and turn it into an opportunity. I guess is what I'm saying. So
Hannah
yeah,
from Des Moines, Iowa wrote in, and again, kind of the same theme here. She says, Richard, you mentioned that business owners often spread themselves too thin. What's your advice for entrepreneurs who feel like every new opportunity could be the one? When I saw her question come in, it immediately made me think, by nature, entrepreneurs are always looking for new opportunities. So it's a really good question in terms of entrepreneurs who keep getting those opportunities, but you end up spreading yourself too thin because you're trying to go after everything.
you know what it reminds me of? I'll tell you what it reminds me of. The early days when I was building the company and we had, I'm meeting with the venture capitalist, and the venture capitalist would constantly tell me, look, you need to focus as a pure play. Because if you come in and you say, we can do this, we can do this, we can do this over here, but I got ideas on this over here, and they'll go, "Oh, we're never going to be able to make this work. You need to go," and they would explain to me, do you realize that a pure play is going to get a higher multiple when it goes public? And I'd say, really, pure play? What do you mean? Well, if pick out what it is you're going to do as a company and do it really well and do as much of it as you can and build this company on. And then after you get yourself out there and you've got enough management, enough leadership in your company, and you want to spread your wings and add additional products, if you will, divisions, whatever, then do it. And so, and that's exactly what I started out with. So I said, okay, got you. So we focused on exactly what we're going to do. We didn't spread ourselves too thin. We said, this is what we're going to do. Once we got out there and we began and we raised the money publicly, we added this division, we added that division. So we began to vertically integrate the business, but we had the management team, we had the skills to do it, and we had the financing to do it. So this is kind of like growing up, you know. As you grow up, you can, you start out riding a bicycle, and eventually you can ride a motorcycle. Next thing you know, you can drive a car, right? And or a bus or a truck or ride a horse or whatever. But you get all these different skills that you begin to develop as you grow it up. And the companies are kind of like that. You can't go out and say, we're going to do 14 different things, because I can promise you're going to fail if you do that. You probably won't do any one of them very good. So it's important why do doctors specialize? You got a cardiologist, you got a neurosurgeon, you got an orthopedic surgeon, you got a primary care guy, you got a urologist, you got, an oncologist. Why? Because they can't do, it's just too complex to say, okay, I'm going to be an oncologist, a urologist, and a cardiovascular surgeon. That ain't going to make the cut. I'm telling you, you can't do all those things. It's just, you got to focus on and put it together appropriately. Don't spread yourself too thin. The other thing, is if you're going to try to grow fast, you're going to have to build a management team with you as you grow. You're going to have to add the layers of management in, and you're going to have to set up all your standards. And when you set the standards up for each level of person, and then you give them the reporting responsibility. You can do this up to this point, but when you get there, then you're going to need to then you got to make sure you get approval for this and that and the other. So you have levels of approval. I had it. I had people that could spend $100,000 and I didn't even know it, all the way up to division presidents that had $1 million. They could spend $1 million. They could, buy $1 million worth of equipment. They could hire employees. They didn't have to call me, but they were accountable for the profitability of their division.
Mm-hmm.
See what I'm saying?
Yes.
So they knew that we were expecting them to have a 20% profit margin or whatever it was. And, they could hire these people, but they better not hire too many. And because if they do, then, and then they had a budget. They had a capital equipment budget. They knew that they had $1 million worth of authority, but they could only spend maybe 50 million next year, or maybe 30 million or 20, or whatever their division budget was. So as long as they operated within that, I was okay with them spending having $1 million limit. And And so you've got to be able to structure. That sounds like a lot. I know it does, but it was a lot. But you're running a multi-billion-dollar company, so you got to let loose some. Back to how do you spread? Can you do everything? No, you have to let other people take responsibility, and you have to hold them accountable. And in doing that, now if the guy went out and he spent $2 million and he had $1 million limit, we got a problem.
Yeah,
We got a problem. If he
yeah,
had a $20 million budget and he spent 25 million, we got a problem.
got a problem.
That guy probably is not going to make the cut long term, and something's wrong with him up here because he knew he had a budget. You would never want somebody working for you in a senior position that couldn't operate within his budget or operate within his limits of authority. So I had limits of authority as CEO of the company. The board put limits of authority on me. I
Sure,
couldn't operate. I mean, there were times I had to go to the board and say, "Look, I need approval for this." And you do that a lot of times because that also gives you an opportunity to make sure that you're doing the right thing. Because people will say, "Well, now explain to me." And the smart people on your board would say, "All right, give me 3 reasons why you think that's the right thing to do." And then that makes you think. And I would do the same thing to my division people if they came in and said, "I need to spend, $5 million on this, and I've got $1 million limit." I'd make them explain to me why we had to spend five, and why couldn't we spend three? And that would make and a lot of times, Dave, they went back and three did it.
sure.
Didn't need to be five. But anyways, most of the time those guys were right on target. Most of them were pretty good. So,
Let's
what's
get
your
to
next question?
Dan from Kansas City, Missouri, wrote in at info@scrushyonbusiness.com. Said, Richard, both you and Bill Manovich mentioned the importance of persistence. How do you keep that drive as things move slower than expected, especially in the early goings of a business?
Oh man, that's one of the hardest things. Uh, you know, it's a heavy load. You get up every morning and you know that you're carrying this heavy load to get these things done. And some things just they don't look like they're going to get done. You're like, oh man, I've told my wife many times. Leslie, you're not gonna believe what I have to do today. And then she'd say, well, I know you're going to be able to get it done. And that, of course, encouraged me, and I would go work very, very hard to get it done. But sometimes it's some pretty heavy lifting to keep pushing, pushing, and pushing. And the hardest part really is pushing the people that work for you, that for them to understand why we have to get these things done. We've got to close this. You know, uh, working on some of the acquisitions I worked on, working on some of the building of new hospitals and things. We had planned, we went to the board, we got approval to do these things. We built it into the budget. We had to go out and do it. And if my team was not connected to what we had told the board and Wall Street we were going to do, then we had a problem because we had to get out there and we had to push and we had to work. So, some of the people didn't like the fact that I would ask them every week, what are you doing? Did you get that done? Are we getting it done? Are we getting it done? Because in my mind, I'm thinking we told everybody we were going to do it. We got to make that happen. I'm the one where the buck stops. I'm the guy that's going to get beat up when I go to Wall Street and say, well, we told you we were going to build 5 hospitals last quarter and we only built 2. But they're in the plan, and they, of course, next time you go up there and you tell them you're going to do something, they wouldn't believe you. So yeah, you got, just like Billy said, he had a plan. He had to get out there, he had to make it happen, and it's not easy sometimes, but that's what makes the difference, And a true entrepreneurial, I mean, somebody's got that entrepreneurial spirit, just keeps pounding and pounding and pounding. And if you are out there, somebody listening today, and you don't have that fortitude to pound and push and to make it happen, uh, you got to really ask yourself, am I doing what I should be doing? Because if you can't do that, then might not be able to build a company. I mean, it's not easy, but the rewards are great. And then there will be breakthrough points. There will always be mountains and there will always be valleys, but there will be breakthrough points where you go, look at that, I got that done. And that gives you momentum to go to the next one and the next one and the next one. But you think about it, it's much better to be building your dream than to be working on somebody else's. Okay.
Yes. Yep. It's like a round of golf, Richard.
Hmm.
Those one or two flush shots, they'll keep you coming back to the course week in and week out.
Right.
Let's wrap up with this one. This is from Colin in Lincoln, Nebraska. He says, Richard, what's one question you wish more entrepreneurs would ask before they start raising money or seeking investors?
Golly, I don't know if there's one. You know, they, yeah, gosh, I don't even know where to go with that one. I think um, they just need to make sure that they have a viable business. They need to ask that question. And maybe what we've been talking about, do they have the fortitude to carry out what they got to carry out over can I make this? Can I spend 5 years focused 100% on this, making this happen? Do I have the time? Do I have the energy? Do I have the right amount of money? Those are questions that I think you got to answer before you go down the road, because otherwise you're going to fail. You're going to fall flat. I want to leave with one other thing too. I was it just it's a scripture, but I just want to throw it out there. In Job 33:14 through 15, scripture reads, "For God speaks again and again through people who do not recognize it, though they do not recognize it. He speaks in dreams and visions of the night, when deep sleep falls on people as they lie in their beds." Now, the reason I read that is I believe that. And I believe that people are called and are given gifts and are given talents. And I think that if we all have a plan, I mean, God has a plan for our life. I believe that. And He has a plan for your life if you're watching this. And if in fact you're having those dreams, and these are real dreams. I mean, this is not like, okay, man, I wish I had a new boat. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about where you literally have an entrepreneurial spirit, where you feel like God has pointed you in a direction and said, you need to be doing this. Here's an idea. Here's something that it really weighs on you. And you wake up in the morning and you think, and you remember you had this, and then you have it multiple times. So to me, when we talk about entrepreneurship and dreams and visions, I mean, these are real things. This is not something, you're just driving around in your car and just think, well, I think I ought to go do this or I ought to go do that. No, man, I mean, this is where you feel like it's God given. And I believe people are called to be physicians. I think people are called to be business people. People are called into the ministry. They're called into all sorts of different professions. And I believe I was called into the business world to do business things. And I felt leadership, callings on my life. And I found myself doing things just like this podcast today. I feel like I need to share experiences with people. And, Dave, I believe that God hooked you and I up for this, such a time as this, to do what we're doing. So I just want to leave with that and let people think about that. And if you feel like you're being called into something, especially into a business, and you're having dreams about it, really study it and then ask those questions, just like you just said, and then try and figure out, is this real? Is this where I need to take my life? Because you may be being called, maybe there's an opportunity for you to do something much greater than what you're doing today.
We will leave that there. That's a perfect spot to stop. We thank everyone for their questions. Info at scrushyonbusiness.com. We appreciate you tuning in and listening, and we will talk to you next week on our next episode of Scrushy on Business. Have a great week, everyone.